All right, let's try this again with the camera actually on this time. We'll give it a whirl that way and see if it works better than it did the last time. But anyway, good to have you here. We had our first week into 2021 pretty much behind us now, and hope it's going well for you. That you're off to a good start. And anytime I think of the year, I am reminded of the year 2000, or I guess technically 1999. And for almost a year, we fretted and wrung our hands about what was going to happen at midnight on New Year's Eve of 2000. Are the computers going to crash? Are VCRs going to work? Are the planes going to fall out of the sky? All those things we worried about. And here we are, 21 years later, still kicking. And that seems like 2000 seems like a whole lifetime ago. And so, good lesson for us. Don't fret much. Don't worry about those things. I don't. I can't. I'm going to mess it up. I know. But somebody said that. The things we worry about them, it's like 70% never happen, or 80% never happen, and the rest we can't do anything about anyway, or something like that. Anyway, you get the point. Most of the stuff we worry about never even comes about, and the rest of it we can't do too much about anyway. And so let's just trust the Lord and serve Him, continue to follow Him and look for His leadership, and be the men and women that God has called us to be, and let Him do the worrying, and that's easier said than done. But let's look at a text this morning that is a good text, kind of to go along with that thought. It is a again another psalm. That David wrote while he was on the run from King Saul. Again, Saul was jealous of David and the attention that he received, especially after David defeated Goliath, and was convinced that David was trying to take the throne from him. And nothing we read, nothing we see, nothing in Scripture indicates that there is even the slightest amount of truth to that. It appears that David did nothing but faithfully serve his king, but Saul got it in his mind and set out to kill him. And so, for probably roughly, we estimate about 12 years that David was on the run from David. And this psalm is a good psalm. A couple things about it that I want you to notice, and I want to point out to you again. It says that this is to the chief musicians, Neganoth, Maskil. Anytime you see the word maskil above a psalm, what that means is that psalm, this psalm, was written for instruction. It is one to go back to. It's one to lean on, to look at when we have questions. As someone has said, when all else fails, follow the directions. These Maskil Psalms are the directions. They are the directions that are given to us. And this psalm is about what to do when we reach the end of our rope, when we don't know what else to do, when the only hope we have is God. As believers, we believe that God is faithful and God is going to take care of us. Just sometimes we don't see it happening. Sometimes we don't see how it's going to happen. And we struggle to recognize, we struggle to see God. We struggle, let's be very honest, we struggle even to believe and trust that God is going to have His good pleasure, good will in our circumstance. And so, again, we need to remember that sometimes we face these situations and circumstances just so God can teach us to rely on Him and to trust Him. And all of us at times in our life come out of situations or go in to find ourselves in situations where again there's nothing we can do. We are powerless. It is above our skill level. It's above our ability to do anything about it, and we must rely on God. And what we believe on the timeline here, we looked at Doeg, the Edomite who killed all the priests at Nob in the 52nd Psalm, and now shortly after that, David was hiding from Saul in the wilderness of Ziph. And so we have the tabernacle in Nob, and now we've moved from Nob to Ziph. And the Ziphites, the people of Ziph, they were like David, from Judah, the tribe of Judah. However, we know that they betrayed David, and they sold David out. If you look at the superscription of this psalm, it is again a Maskil psalm, a psalm of instruction, is a psalm of David. When the Ziphites came and said to Saul, "Doth not David hide himself with us?" And so David finds himself in a desperate situation. Saul has now been told exactly where David is hiding. And so when we find ourselves in situations sometimes where we don't even know how to pray, remember this psalm, mark this psalm to come back to. And so let's start looking into this psalm. We're going to see again something that I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but it just keeps coming up this way in the Psalms. The first verse says, "Save me, O God, by thy name, and judge me by thy strength." And so the first thing we learn again from David is to go to God for help. And again, I think there's a reason that God keeps bringing that point to us in the Psalms, and that is because many times we don't. Many times we determine to try everything else we know, to try everything else possible, and then when everything else doesn't work, and we've messed the situation up and we've made it worse, then we want to go to God, and we want him to bail us out. And so Saul here, he knows where David is, and David doesn't know that at the time. And Saul and his soldiers, they come in. And 1 Samuel chapter 23 tells us that they managed to completely surround David. They had him surrounded, and his men, and they were about to win. They were about to destroy David and his men. And David knows that there is no way that he can be delivered. He knows there's nothing that can happen except for God to intervene. And so he cries out, "Save me, O God, and judge me by thy strength." And so David does two things in that statement that are important. First of all, he calls out to God, "Save me, O God." That is what it sounds like. It's simply that David recognizes he's trapped, he is surrounded, and he is calling on God to deliver him, to get him out of this desperate situation. But not only that, he goes a step further in this prayer and says, "And judge me by thy strength." He also, not only does he want to be delivered, but he wants justice to be done. He wants to be cleared. He wants his name to be vindicated from the accusations or the charges that Saul was making. He wants Israel to know that he is not guilty. He wants God to know. He wants the people to know that he's innocent. And again, the way the people of that time thought, and really a lot the way we still think today is much like Job's friends when Job was suffering. And they came to him and said, "Look, Job, what have you done wrong?" The people of that time, if Saul was able to conquer and surround and capture or kill David, what the majority of people would have believed was that Saul then was vindicated, that God allowed Saul to kill David. David must be guilty. That was the way, and again, many people would still think that way. And so David, when he says, "Judge me," he says, "Deliver me." And by doing that, you'll show the world, you'll show Israel. Let's be specific. You'll show Israel that I am innocent. And the word that he uses there for strength is military strength. He's saying, "You intervene and deliver me so that the world will know that I am innocent." And so the first thing that we learn again is to cry out to God. David takes it a step further in verse 2 when he says, "Hear my prayer, O God, give ear to the words of my mouth." And so he prays, "Lord, save me." And then in verse 2, he begs God to hear his prayer, to listen to the words that he was calling out. And he goes on in verse 3 and says, "For strangers are risen up against me, and oppressors seek after my soul. They have not set God before them." And so David, he explains to God, he calls out to God, and he tells him why he needs his help. He says there are people, strangers, and he's not so much saying strangers to him, people he doesn't know, but strangers to God, people who have no fear of God, people who don't care about the will of God and the work of God, and they are setting out, they are trying to destroy me. And he's speaking particularly here of the Ziphites, those men from Ziphon, who had from Ziph, who had sold him out to Saul, and the word "stranger" that is used there many times in Scripture is a word that was used to describe Gentiles, those again who were foreigners, who were outside of the law, and so David says these men have turned against me. And you know, even these men are coming against me. And remember, David has already been anointed. Yes, let me back up. God has already rejected Saul. It's not that David is trying to overthrow Saul. God has rejected Saul. He has already chosen David to be Saul's replacement. And so when these men of Ziph reject and go against David, they are in effect going against the will of God. They are rebelling against God. And like David, let's see if we can round this thing up. Like David, many times we find ourselves trapped. We find ourselves in situations that are beyond our ability, beyond our control, and many times it's caused by those who are rebelling against God. And so the first thing that this 54th Psalm teaches us is that even in those circumstances, we don't turn our back on God. We don't abandon our faith. We don't reject His plan and His will. In fact, David shows us that in those circumstances, we rely on Him even more. And I know some folks are listening to me today going, "Well, what else would I do?" Well, that's true for many people, but you know that there are people who, when life goes bad, when the situation gets desperate, and instead of clinging to God, they run from God. They'll get out of church, they blame God, but David teaches us here, when our circumstances are beyond control, that is the time that even more than whenever we turn and we cling to God and we rely on Him and we call out on His holy name. And so, whatever you're facing today, whatever you're going through, you keep that in mind. Mark this psalm. You may not need it today, but you may need it tomorrow. So, you make a note to go back to this 54th psalm when you're facing trouble and difficult situations. All right. Hope that helps you on your journey. Have a great day, and we'll see you back here first thing tomorrow morning.